Foreign dignitaries continue to arrive in South Africa ahead of President Cyril Ramaphosa's inauguration on Wednesday. Zimbabwean President Emmerson Mnangagwa is among the heads of state who've already touched down at the Waterkloof Air Base in Pretoria. Mnangagwa landed just after Namibian President Dr. Nangolo Mbumba's arrival. President Cyril Ramaphosa will take the oath of office for his second term. The heads of state are greeted by the National Ceremonial Guard and ceremonial dancers. Comprehensive safety and security protocols in collaboration with the Department of International Relations and Cooperation are observed both at the Waterkloof Air Base and OR Tambo International Airport in Kempton Park. Now, several road closures around the Union buildings have been implemented ahead of the inauguration. Well, of course, as we've earlier stated, foreign dignitaries arriving at both the Waterkloof Base and as well as OR Tambo International Airport. Now, earlier on, we saw presidents of the Seychelles as well as Mauritius arriving at OR Tambo International Airport. We also took you to the Waterkloof Base, where SABC International News editor Sophie Mokoena is currently standing by at the Waterkloof Base in Pretoria. Of course, we saw her ushering in there, of course, the presidents of Zimbabwe as well as Namibia. That was earlier on today. And of course, those visuals coming to you live there are OR Tambo International Airport. Of course, everybody monitoring developments there ahead of that, inauguration tomorrow of President Cyril Ramaphosa. Of course, all eyes on the Union buildings as well tomorrow as all of those ceremonies continue to take place. Of course, we'll continue to give you analysis on the importance of this particular inauguration. While on the line now, we've got Professor Ntsikelelo Breakfast, who joins us, in fact, via video link for a preview analysis on the presidential inauguration tomorrow. Prof, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Of course, all eyes are on Pretoria ahead of that presidential inauguration at the Union buildings. Just perhaps your sentiments in terms of what we can look forward to tomorrow as, the President Cyril Ramaphosa is then sworn in.
I think most people on the African continent have been very much impressed with the manner in which the ruling party in particular has accepted the electoral outcomes, because in other countries, in particular on the African continent, normally when election results are unveiled, the military comes into the picture and poses a threat. So I think the continent in particular would like to see more of this in other African countries in terms of the democratic political culture. So there will be a lot of heads of state definitely attending, and other dignitaries looking up to the model that we have built in the country.
And I mean, just as we reflect, this is a question I also asked a previous political analyst. I mean, just a symbolism for Ramaphosa himself, just going into this particular, seventh administration. And of course, his party, the ANC. I mean, it is, the first time in 30 years that the former Liberation Party did not secure an outright majority. So just how symbolic is tomorrow for both Ramaphosa and the ANC?
Well, the political longevity or the political lifespan of liberation movements, normally it tends to be affected by institutionalization of corruption, as it has been the case with the ANC, because it has been dealt with a blow in a big way. As you know, Unati, one-party dominance is a thing of the past, and the ANC is no longer dominating the political landscape. But as I indicated to you, thank goodness they've accepted the electoral outcomes, which is something that as a country we can build upon. But I think also that conveys our democratic consolidation, because in other countries when things of this nature happen, conflicts break out. But I think at the party level, he will have to give an explanation as to what happened, because you know that the ANC has dropped from 57% to 40% on the dot. Now that is big deal. There must be an explanation for that. So I anticipate
Breakfast, let me interrupt you there. Let me ask you to pause your thoughts and your thinking. I'll come back to that. Apologies for that. I just want us to go back to the Waterkloof Base. That is, of course, where we are seeing dignitaries coming in, and of course, our SABC's Sophie Mokoena is currently on the ground. Sophie, over to you in terms of who is next coming in.
Well, we've just seen the plane of the President of Angola touching down. As you can see there, he has arrived. You know that he is the current chair of SADC, and therefore he will be representing the regional organization SADC, but also Angola as a country. You know that the relationship between Angola and South Africa are quite strong. They date back to exile years. As you know that they have a common interest in terms of the liberation organizations in the SADC region. And also you'd remember that many of those who were in exile, some of them received military training in the camps in countries such as Angola. When we talk about that Battle of Quito Carnival, as we saw the Vice President of Cuba visiting Freedom Park earlier on, they were part of that battle, and we saw countries such as Namibia, Mozambique fighting in that conflict at that time, fighting with the then apartheid government, and therefore him coming to South Africa is quite important. We were expecting him to visit South Africa some few months ago on a state visit, but it didn't happen. But here he is today attending the inauguration. He's going to join other heads of state and government at Union Buildings tomorrow. As you saw earlier on, the President of Zimbabwe arriving, Emmerson Mnangagwa, the incoming SADC chair. We saw the President of Namibia arriving and the President of Mauritius. Therefore, we are beginning to see more leaders arriving ahead of the inauguration tomorrow. We also expect at around just before 4:30, we are going to see the arrival of the President of Mozambique, and then later it will be Tanzania, we'll see Nigeria. This is a plane carrying the President of Angola. While South Africa has strong relationship with Angola, in terms of trade, there's a lot that can still be done to improve the trade relations. This oil-rich country is one of the most strategic countries in the SADC region, particularly on issues that are related to oil and gas, and therefore quite an important country where it will be expected that much as you have a new set up in South Africa, a government that is more inclusive with other parties, these relationships will continue. And it will be interesting to see what is going to happen to the Department of International Relations and Cooperation in terms of the political head who is going to take over from Dr. Naledi Pandor, or the president may decide to bring back Dr. Naledi Pandor. As you know, that much as she didn't make it in the list of the ANC in terms of number of MPs in parliament, but the president can still decide to bring people who are not necessarily in that list because he's got that privilege of appointing 2 ministers out of the normal process of appointing ministers from those who are MPs, and therefore it will be interesting what is going to happen. But also generally the issue of foreign policy right now, many people are talking about what is going to happen in terms of the foreign policy. As you know, that the main party in this arrangement, the DA, has different views in terms of its posture and position on international relations, with focus on the north, the developed north, while the ANC's interest is in the southern region, followed by the continent and the south, and therefore many people will be watching, and I think even international academics and analysts are trying to make sense of whether we are going to see a foreign policy that is toned down. But when I spoke to the Deputy Secretary, First Deputy Secretary General of the ANC, who is also the chairperson of the standing committee, or the committee of the ANC on international relations, Mokoena, said that the issue of a foreign policy in terms of trade-off, it's a no-no. As you can see, the ambassador of Angola moving forward to receive the president of Angola, and the formalities have started here. As you can see, the officials or the Air Force with those formalities. Of course, the cultural group standing by. Earlier on, when President of Namibia arrived, I said it was a vendor cultural group. It was the Tsonga. Now we are seeing the cultural group performing the formalities, and cultural group from the culture perspective, the vendor culture. Mozambique has touched down, as I pointed out, that they will be back to back. So President Nyusi, the outgoing president of Mozambique, has also touched down. You know that Mozambique will be going to elections, and Frelimo has appointed a new leader who will be contesting elections on behalf of Frelimo, a young leader in that country, and President Nyusi will be retiring after elections. And when you look at the plane there, we are expecting the president of Angola to leave the plane. It is not Mozambique, it's actually a plane from Angola. It looks like they are using two Air Force planes. Perhaps that's an indication of high-powered delegation from Angola, a clear demonstration of the commitment to the relationship the two countries have and have enjoyed for many, many, many years, including during exile years. Let's listen in as we watch the cultural group performing there to welcome the president of Angola. Yes, the president of Angola, you'd recall that the country went to elections last year, and the governing party in that country was able to win elections, and they are currently continuing. There you have it, the president of Angola.
Sophie, I don't know if you can hear me. Of course, I am in conversation a little bit earlier on with Professor Breakfast, and of course he was saying, you know, that SADC has particularly been impressed by South Africa in terms of how it has handled these elections. Of course, South Africa celebrating its 30th year of democracy, but also, you know, coming into these elections, they were quite, difficult, and of course with a lot of anxiety and concerns. But seemingly, of course, from the observers as well as the SADC nations, you know, South Africa has been impressed, by the way in which, they have been impressed by the way in which South Africa has handled these elections.
Well, of course, it's true that it's not often where you would see a situation where a former liberation organization that is in power, when it's about to lose election, acting in a professional and diplomatic way, accepting the results and also making a statement, particularly when you listen to what President Cyril Ramaphosa said when the results were announced by the IEC. Immediately he allayed fears of many people who thought that because ANC is a liberation organization, it will be difficult to hand over power. You'd recall this was what people often said, that when ANC loses power, ANC is likely going to resist, but it was not to be. But I think people must give credit to the continent. We know that there are challenges in some countries, but we've seen many countries really the transition being very smooth. When you look at what transpired in Namibia during the passing on of the president of Namibia, there was a proper smooth transition. When you look at countries in East Africa, when there was contestation in terms of the outcome of the elections, the aggrieved parties took the matter to the legal processes and to the highest court in that land, the Supreme Court. The elections were nullified, there was a rerun, and the last election again there was a dispute. It was settled at the Supreme Court, and the current president was confirmed as a winner. And therefore, there are pockets of challenges on the continent, including the coups that we saw in West Africa. But generally, we are seeing a different Africa that is looking at being very stable and more focused on development. And it is these kind of moments and transitions that really paints a positive picture on the continent, that as a liberation organization, you can lose power and you can hand over power. It has happened in other countries such as Zambia, and therefore I think it is a good story to tell that there can be a smooth transition.
Very well, Sophie, let's leave it there for now. Of course, so we will continue to tap in and just check in with you at the Waterkloof Base in Pretoria as those dignitaries continue to come in. Sophie Mokoena there, of course, international news editor for the SABC. Of course, you saw the SADC chairperson, Angolan president, coming in in to the country. Of course, let's continue then to have our discussion with Professor Breakfast, who is standing by. Prof, thank you so much for holding on. You know, just on the back of what Sophie Mokoena has been saying in terms of liberation, you know, movements, and to pick up where we left our conversation, I mean, I asked you the question in terms of, you know, the symbolism of, you know, President Ramaphosa now being re-elected, of course, for the second term at the back of course, the ANC, you know, after 30 years as a former Liberation Party, not really securing an outright majority in terms of these elections.
Well, the romanticism of the past, the glorification of history, and the preservation of a tradition, those are the things of the past, because liberation struggle has always embedded itself in the collective memory. But we've seen now a paradigm shift in the electorate, largely because they've decided to rearrange their social contract. So the arrogance of power of the ANC to do as it pleases, I think, has caught up with them in a big way, because they've been punished. But again, I mean, thank goodness, I mean, they've accepted the electoral outcomes, which is a good thing. I think we must applaud them, because, and I've made this point before, you will never know whether you have a democracy or not until the losers accept that they've lost. And the ANC has accepted that, you know, it does not won the elections outrightly by being the majority party that got over 50, which is a good thing. So I think this conveys a good message to the continent in particular, because whether you like it or not, South Africa is seen as a United States of Africa. Of course, some people see it as a pipe through which neoliberalism can be channeled. So I think now we can be respected on a global scale, in particular on the continent, when you talk about issues of human rights and democracy. So we can use the electoral outcomes as a country to reposition ourselves and to rebrand ourselves as a democracy.
Now, you know, I mean, the inauguration of South Africa's seventh, elected president tomorrow does come hand in glove with the start of the much talked about government of national unity. I mean, there is a lot, there's a mixed bag, I would say, of emotions in terms of what we are likely to see with the GNU, particularly as some people have expressed anxiety as it relates to the parties that make up, you know, the GNU currently, and of course some excitement in terms of seeing the change that a lot of South Africans had been calling for.
Of course, I think the anxiety is caused by the fact that coalition arrangements at local government level have been unworkable and unstable, largely because the political elite have a tendency to rush into forming these coalition arrangements without developing a conflict management mechanism to deal with their internal contradictions. So the beauty about this, and I'm not saying that I am in favor of it, but the beauty of it now is that there is a framework that binds all these coalition partners. So they've signed off a deal, meaning that when there is a conflict, because conflict is natural, where there are human beings, there are problems. So I think now they are going to have a platform at which they will ventilate their issues, as opposed to allowing the government to collapse. So you can see that they want to have a win-win situation, as opposed to a win-lose situation.
And as far as roles are concerned, Prof, I mean, should we really be concerned about that? And I say this because, I mean, just looking at KwaZulu-Natal as an example, you know, where the MK party seemingly looked like it would, once forming a coalition, be leading in that province. Now you find that the IFP is leading, you know, after 2004, you know, and you're seeing positions that have now been announced with the DA in KZN now holding the finance position. So a lot of questions in terms of what has been said by the DA, in that what you will see nationally will then be trickled down in terms of provinces, what we're likely to see in provinces. So should we be concerned about where the DA, as an example, finds its role within provincial levels, and we might see that makeup coming through nationally?
I don't think that we should be concerned, in the sense that it stood to reason that the deal that was struck on a large scale, on a national scale, was going to permeate to other parts of the country. No wonder, for instance, the DA, they've been appointed, their leader has been appointed as the MEC of finance in KZN, and I think also even in the government of Panyaza, Sophie, they are also going to be appointed in other strategic positions. So it's not a deal that is confined to national government, but I think it's a deal that is, permeating throughout the length and the breadth of the country. But it could have been good, though, if MK, in my view, had moved faster in terms of the negotiations, because for crying out loud, they got 45%, which is a sizable number of seats. So they were in a better position to form a government, but I think their slow pace of responsiveness has really caught up with them, because I think they entered into the negotiations late. Unfortunately, they were outmaneuvered by the ANC and the DA and the IFP.
Prof, thank you so much for your analysis. Let's leave it there for now. Professor Ntsikelelo Breakfast, they're just weighing in, of course, in terms of what we are currently seeing just being displayed from a political landscape.